Ladies and gentlemen, this is TVP World. You're watching another edition of Break the Fake, where we debunk fake news and combat false narratives. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and let's get rolling. So, Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Ukraine allegedly, quote, is going to use a nuclear component and plans to attack the Turkish Stream gas pipeline in the Black Sea. The wording was loud, alarming, and conveniently vague. Just enough detail to scare people, not enough to check. See, leave space for your imagination to do the heavy lifting.
Сейчас вот информация тоже наша оперативная идет тоже в СМИ сегодня должна быть, наверное, уже есть. Не успел ничего посмотреть, но речь идет о возможном взрыве газовых наших систем по дну Черного моря. Это так называемый турецкий поток и голубой поток. Никак успокоиться не могут.
See, these kind of statements tend to surface when tensions are already high. Analysts call it a strategy of preemptive accusation. First, you float a warning about a possible provocation. Then whatever happens next can be plugged neatly into the script you prepared in advance. Now, why Turkish Stream? Because Turkish Stream transports Russian gas to Turkey and further to southern Europe. It is a strategic energy route. Any threat to it instantly raises the stakes. Energy, international relations, security in the Black Sea region, that is not a random choice. Why now, you ask? Well, information leaks like this can serve several purposes. To prepare the domestic audience for escalation, to shift responsibility for possible incidents, to reinforce the image of Ukraine as a threat to third countries, to, move attention away from their own military actions. In modern information warfare, it is not only what has happened that matters, it's also what might happen. Statements about a nuclear component and threats to a strategic gas pipeline sound like part of a larger information game. They generate fear, they generate uncertainty, but so far they've not been backed by verified evidence. In moments like this, critical thinking is the only filter that works, because sometimes the loudest warnings are not describing reality but trying to manufacture it. And while new dramatic statements are being prepared, the world is watching something much less theatrical: the facts. After Vladimir Putin floated claims about a Ukrainian nuclear component, Dmitry Medvedev, a deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, amplified the message. He warned that transferring nuclear technology to Ukraine would be a, quote, direct path to World War, adding that, quote, these games are already taking place. World War, nuclear technology, games, the vocabulary is calibrated for maximum alarm. It signals catastrophe first, explanation later, or really, not at all.
В то время как одни страны стремятся к миру, вот недавно президент Трамп проводил саммит мира, а другие страны активно готовятся к войне. Только что появилась информация нашей службы внешней разведки о том, что Англия и Франция собираются передать ядерные технологии Украине. Чем это может грозить, мы прекрасно с вами понимаем. Это прямая дорога к мировой войне, ну и последствия таких шагов мы неоднократно называли. Это все хорошо известно, тем не менее такие игрища происходят.
The structure of this rhetoric is consistent. Step 1, label support for Ukraine as reckless. Step 2, attach it to the specter of global war. Step 3, present Russia as the side issuing responsible warnings. In this framework, defensive assistance becomes escalation, diplomatic backing becomes provocation, and any technical discussion involving nuclear issue is reframed as a shortcut to apocalypse. But there is a legal and political distinction between nuclear weapons and peaceful nuclear technologies. They're governed by international agreements and oversight. Collapsing that distinction in public rhetoric does not erase it in reality. It simply raises the emotional temperature. When World War is invoked repeatedly, the term shifts from a concrete danger to a rhetorical instrument. The more it is used as a warning label for routine policy decisions, the less precise it becomes. And then placed alongside earlier claims about provocations and threat to infrastructure, the message forms a clear narrative line. Russia is cast as the cautious actor issuing alerts. Others are portrayed as irresponsible players moving the world towards disaster. Yet, no new verified facts accompany this escalation in tone. What expands is not evidence, but vocabulary. And when every step by an opponent is described as a direct path to world war, the phrase "stop describing a specific scenario" becomes a pressure tool. Real global security is shaped by actions and, agreements, not by the volume of warnings. So, while dramatic language circulates, the real test is simple. Do the facts match the alarm? So far, not so much. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said that Russia will target Estonia with its nuclear capabilities if NATO were to deploy its own nuclear weapons on Russian territory. At the same time, he stressed, "We are not threatening Estonia or any other European country." There's a familiar pattern in this kind of messaging. It starts with reassurance, then comes the conditional scenario. And by the end, the conversation has shifted to targeting a neighbor with nuclear weapons. First denial, then the warning.
Министр иностранных дел Эстонии не исключает размещение ядерного оружия в Эстонии в случае, если так посчитает НАТО. А Эстония от нас сами знаем где.
Эстония совсем рядом с нами. Эстония мы не угрожаем, как и всем остальным европейским странам. Но если на территории Эстонии будет ядерное оружие, нацеленное на нас, то на территорию Эстонии будет нацелено наше ядерное оружие. И Эстония должна четко это понимать. Россия всегда будет делать то, что должно для обеспечения собственной безопасности, тем более в вопросах ядерного сдерживания.
Peskov emphasized that Estonia is very close to Russia. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I mean, the geography is not disputed, but obviously he brought it up for other reasons. See, Peskov's comments followed a statement by the Estonian foreign minister, who did not rule out the possibility of deploying nuclear weapons if the alliance decided so. A hypothetical discussion. Russia's threat, however, was direct. So a country with a population of about 1.3 million people suddenly finds itself placed at the center of a global nuclear debate. If this rhetoric is to be believed, the strategic balance of the world now depends on one of Europe's smaller nations. Again, this formula has become routine in Russian foreign policy rhetoric. A claim of restraint is paired with an explicit threat framed as a response. It is meant to project strength and determination, but in reality, it raises tensions. In today's world, nuclear statements should not be background noise. Even when presented as conditional, they resonate far beyond the press room. Diplomats speak of caution, public rhetoric grows sharper, and in this escalating exchange, the stakes are the security of an entire region. And that's really not something you want to mess around with. So in North Korea, personnel decisions are starting to look hereditary. According to a South Korean publication, the Chunsun Ilbo, citing the National Intelligence Service, the 12-year-old daughter of Kim Jong-un has been given a senior position in the country's missile command. This structure controls North Korea's nuclear and missile forces, one of the key elements of its defense system. Media reports say she allegedly received report from generals and give orders. Yeah, 12-year-old in the nuclear chain of command. See, in most countries, leading a missile program requires decades of education, military service, institutional vetting. In North Korea, the decisive qualification appears to be lineage. Analysts have long interpreted Kim's daughter's growing presence as public events as preparation for a transfer of power. And until recently, that kind of looks symbolic. But according to these reports, it may now involve real managerial authority. The structure itself follows a familiar pattern, from Kim Il-sung to Kim Jong-il to the current leader. Power has remained within the Kim family. And this would not be a shift in the system, it would be a continuation. In a state built around dynastic legitimacy, strategic command and succession planning enforces each other. So the key question remains whether this reflects operational authority or just carefully staged symbolism. In a closed system of the DPRK, independent verification is very difficult. But the message being constructed is clear. A successor image is taking shape early, and it is being linked directly to the country's most powerful military structure. So while most governments treat nuclear command as the ultimate test of experience and judgment, in North Korea, it may also be an after-school activity if you have the correct surname. And with that, we conclude this edition of Break the Fake. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.